CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us. Chris, help me out on this, brother. As I understand, Erdogan said, I'm going into northern Syria. And Trump said, well, okay, if you do it on 3 conditions, but it's okay. And then he wasn't backing the Kurds, and the Kurds are getting decimated. And now we're talking about sanctions against Turkey. Clarify that a little bit for me, will you, man?
Well, it's a very complicated situation, but Erdogan has violated those 3 commitments that he apparently made to President Trump. Civilians have been targeted. Humanitarian crisis is huge. And Christians and religious minorities have been targeted, especially by what's called the Free Syrian Army. These are the jihadist troops that work right alongside the Turkish army. And, you know, Pat, it reminds me of something from the Battle of Gettysburg. Back then, just before the battle started, there was General John Buford. And he was there on the edge of Gettysburg, and he said that he had taken the high ground, and he knew that the high ground was going to make a difference in the battle. And it apparently seems, Pat, that the U.S. has abandoned the high ground. Just a week ago, 8 days ago, the United States was really the superpower in the Middle East. They were the main player in northeast Syria. Several days later, 8 days later, they are not. Russians are in. The Syrian army is in. ISIS is perhaps on the move, and Iran is on the doorstep as well. So right now, it appears that Erdogan has either misled, betrayed, deceived, or lied to President Trump. Whether or not the United States can get back this influence through the visit by Vice President Mike Pence, by the sanctions proposed by Senator Graham and House Leader Pelosi, and whether or not the United States stays with some boots on the ground, that means a lot, Pat, to give some sort of leverage for the Syrian Democratic Forces that have been our main ally against the battle of ISIS. So have some boots on the ground there by the United States will make a big difference.
Well, now, as we understand, Assad used chemical weapons against his people. We labeled him a, whatever you want to say, a thug. He was supposed to have been taken out. He was a red line, was supposed to have been crossed by Obama, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're calling on Assad to come back in. The Kurds were in charge of that part of Syria, weren't they, up till a few days ago?
That's exactly right. That's one of the tragedies of this situation. We've reported on this area, northeast Syria, or the self-administration of northeast Syria, the military arm called the Syrian Democratic Forces. They had begun a democratic representative form of government there for several years, called the Tree of Liberty by some. Only to protect themselves from a genocide by Turkey's Erdogan, they had to turn to the Assad regime, backed by the Russians, to save themselves. And so they've really made a bitter pill, a poison pill, as it were, to be able to save their own people. So they've brought in a very bad actor, Bashar Assad, who has used chemical weapons on his own people. The Syrian army is deployed throughout the Syrian-Turkish border. And really, the SDF has now made an agreement, to some degree with them. So it really is a bad situation for them. Hopefully, there'll be some way that the U.S. can redeem the situation, at least in partial.
Chris, Erdogan is a thug. He has destroyed the leadership of his army. He's destroyed the civilian leadership. He is a vicious dictator. Why in the world are we dealing with a man like that?
That's a great question, Pat. He has more journalists in the world are in Turkish prisons than anywhere else in the world. Dissidents, politicians, professors, educators have all been arrested and imprisoned by Erdogan. He is a thug. He's a dictator. And really, he's being the bully in this situation right now. He has said that he's going to infiltrate this area and resettle up to 2 million refugees. Why we are dealing with him is a great question. You know, Lindsey Graham said in his statement that have a win-win, but really from the Syrian people that I've been talking to, they say they don't think Erdogan deserves a win right now. He needs to be pushed back throughout all of this Syrian territory that he occupies right now.
Well, Chris Mitchell, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a confused situation, but I think we have betrayed the Kurdish allies, and it will be very hard in the future to get anyone to come along with us. These were as staunch allies. And we understand at least 1,000 or more members of ISIS have been freed from prisons because the Kurds no longer can fight two battles. They have to be fighting the Turks on the one side and maintaining prisons on the other. They couldn't do it. So the ISIS is re-established in that area. We thought they were gone. They're not gone anymore. And it's very confusing, but it should bring grief to the hearts of every freedom-loving person in this land.